Emily Carter did not expect that ordinary Thursday to change her life. The morning had started like any other, with coffee growing cold beside her laptop and emails piling up faster than she could answer them. She worked at a marketing firm in downtown Portland, and lately her days felt like endless deadlines stitched together by exhaustion. Around noon, her manager canceled an afternoon meeting, giving everyone permission to leave early. Most of her coworkers cheered, but Emily simply smiled quietly. An unexpected free afternoon felt rare, almost suspicious, like time she didn't know how to use anymore. Still, an idea formed in her mind during the drive home. She would surprise Daniel. Maybe they could cook dinner together or watch a movie like they used to before life became schedules and responsibilities. Rain began falling as she turned into their neighborhood, thin drops tapping against the windshield. Their townhouse looked peaceful, warm lights glowing behind the curtains. Daniel's car sat in the driveway, which surprised her. He usually worked late these days. For a moment, happiness pushed away the tiredness she carried. Maybe this would be a good evening. Maybe things between them would finally feel normal again. Emily stepped inside quietly, setting her keys on the table. The house smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet. She noticed 2 mugs in the kitchen sink. One belonged to Daniel, but the other was unfamiliar, pale blue, taller than their usual cups. She paused, trying to remember if they had bought it recently. Nothing came to mind. A small feeling of unease slipped into her chest, but she quickly dismissed it. Daniel probably had a visitor or a coworker had stopped by. There had to be a simple explanation. She called his name softly, expecting him to appear from the living room. No answer came. Instead, faint voices drifted down from upstairs. One was Daniel's, the other was a woman's. Emily stood still, listening without meaning to. The conversation sounded calm, serious, not laughter or casual chatting. Something about the tone made her heart beat faster. She told herself she was overthinking, yet her feet moved toward the staircase before her mind could stop them. Each step felt heavier than the last. She remembered the early years of their marriage when she used to run up those stairs, excited to tell Daniel about her day. Now she climbed slowly, unsure of what she would find, but suddenly afraid of knowing. The bedroom door was slightly open. Light spilled into the hallway. She pushed the door gently. Daniel turned immediately, shock spreading across his face. Standing near him was Lauren, a woman Emily recognized from an office party months earlier. Lauren looked equally startled, holding her coat as if she had just been about to leave. Nothing dramatic was happening, no raised voices or closeness. Yet the atmosphere felt intimate in a way Emily could not ignore. It was the kind of silence filled with unfinished feelings. Time seemed to slow. Emily noticed small details: Daniel's nervous posture, Lauren avoiding eye contact, the awkward distance between them that somehow confirmed something deeper had already crossed a line. "I didn't know you'd be home," Daniel said, his voice uncertain. The words landed harder than anger. They sounded like disappointment, not relief. Lauren quickly apologized under her breath and moved toward the door. She passed Emily carefully, as though afraid to touch her, then hurried downstairs. Moments later, the front door closed, leaving only Emily and Daniel in a quiet room that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Emily looked around at the space they shared: framed photos from vacations, books stacked on the nightstand, blankets they had chosen together years ago. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt safe anymore. "How long?" she asked calmly, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Daniel hesitated, and that pause told her more than any confession. He struggled to find words, running a hand through his hair the way he did when stressed. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. Emily almost smiled at how predictable the sentence was. She had heard it in movies, read it in stories, never imagining it would exist inside her own life. "Then tell me what it is," she replied. Daniel explained that nothing physical had happened, that they had only been talking. He said Lauren had been helping him through work stress, that their conversations had grown personal over time. His voice carried guilt but also confusion, as if he himself didn't fully understand how things reached this point. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, absorbing every word. Anger tried to rise, but sadness arrived first. She thought about the past year, the evenings when Daniel seemed distracted. The way conversations between them had become short and practical, focused only on bills or plans. She had noticed the distance but assumed it was temporary. "When did you stop talking to me?" she asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer right away. Finally, he admitted he had felt disconnected for months. Work pressures made him feel like he was failing, and instead of sharing those fears, he withdrew. Lauren had simply listened one day, and that attention made him feel understood again. Emily realized she had been doing the same thing in her own way, burying herself in responsibilities. Believing stability meant their relationship would take care of itself. Neither of them noticed how silence slowly replaced closeness. The realization hurt more than accusation. She stood and walked past him, needing space to breathe. Downstairs, the rain had grown heavier, tapping against the windows like restless thoughts. She stepped outside onto the porch without grabbing a coat, letting the cool air hit her face. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at the street. Tears came quietly, mixing with rain. She wasn't crying only because of Lauren. She was grieving the version of her marriage she believed was unbreakable. Inside, Daniel watched through the window but didn't follow. He seemed unsure whether comfort would help or make things worse. Emily walked toward her car, unsure where she planned to go. Memories followed her their first apartment. Late-night conversations about dreams, promises made when love felt effortless. She wondered when those moments had started fading into routine. She sat behind the steering wheel but didn't start the engine immediately. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, like someone standing at a crossroads she never planned to reach. Part of her wanted to drive away and never return. Another part remembered the years they had built together, the laughter, the support, the quiet kindness Daniel had shown her during difficult times. Life rarely changed because of one single moment. It changed because of many small ones that went unnoticed until it was too late. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, but she didn't read it yet. She needed silence first, space to understand her own feelings before hearing explanations. The rain softened, turning into a gentle drizzle. Cars passed slowly along the street, ordinary life continuing as if nothing had happened. Emily realized that heartbreak did not stop the world. It simply changed how one person moved through it. She finally started the car and drove without direction, letting familiar roads guide her away from the house. Questions filled her mind. Was this betrayal the end of their marriage, or a sign that something had been broken long before she opened that bedroom door? She didn't know the answer. All she knew was that the life she had woken up to that morning no longer existed. Ahead of her waited conversations, she feared decisions she wasn't ready to make and truths she could no longer ignore. As the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, Emily felt both lost and strangely awake. For the first time in months, she saw her relationship clearly, not as perfect or ruined, but fragile, human, and unfinished. And somewhere behind her, in the quiet townhouse filled with memories, Daniel stood alone. Realizing that the moment Emily walked through that door had forced both of them to face what they had avoided for far too long. Neither of them understood yet that this painful evening was only the beginning of a story neither expected. A story that would test love, honesty, and whether two people could find their way back after almost losing each other completely. Emily drove without thinking until the city faded into quiet streets near the Willamette River. The rain slowed, leaving soft drops sliding down her windshield. She parked beside the walking path where she and Daniel used to spend Sunday. Mornings drinking coffee and talking about the future. The memory felt distant now, like a photograph from another life. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, trying to steady her breathing. Shock had slowly turned into deep sadness, but beneath it was something else, clarity. For months, she had sensed something slipping between them, yet she had ignored it, hoping time would fix what silence was slowly breaking. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel's name lit up the screen. She stared at it for a long moment before answering. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Daniel said immediately, his voice low and tired. "I just want a chance to explain everything honestly." Emily watched the river move slowly in the distance. "Then talk," she said quietly. Daniel spoke carefully, choosing his words as if afraid they might cause more damage. He explained how work pressure had been overwhelming him for nearly a year. Projects failed, expectations grew, and he felt like he was constantly disappointing everyone. Instead of sharing those fears with Emily, he buried them. He didn't want to bring stress home, so he pretended everything was fine. Over time, pretending became distance. He met Lauren during long workdays. At first, they only discussed projects, but gradually conversations became personal. She asked how he was doing, and for the first time in months, he admitted he was struggling. That simple moment made him feel seen again. Daniel insisted nothing physical happened, but he admitted emotional boundaries had blurred in ways he never intended. Emily listened silently. His explanation didn't erase the hurt, but it helped her understand how loneliness could exist even inside marriage. "Did you love her?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the fear behind the question. "No," Daniel answered quickly. "I was confused and lonely. That's all. I never stopped loving you." The honesty softened her anger slightly, though trust still felt fragile. She realized she had her own share of distance, too. She had been exhausted from work, assuming Daniel understood without needing words. Both of them had stopped checking in emotionally, believing love alone was enough to hold everything together. They agreed to meet the next morning at a small cafe downtown, neutral space, where they could talk without the weight of home around them. That night, Emily stayed with her friend Rachel, who welcomed her without questions. Emily barely slept. Thoughts moved endlessly through her mind. Memories of happy years, doubts about the future, fear of making the wrong decision. She realized forgiveness was not a single choice, but a process she didn't yet understand. Morning arrived, gray and quiet. Emily reached the cafe early, but still found Daniel already waiting at a corner table. He looked nervous, hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup. Seeing him like that reminded her of their first date years ago when he had been equally unsure but hopeful. They sat across from each other, unsure where to begin. For several minutes, they talked about small things, traffic, the weather, until Emily finally said, "We stopped talking about real things somewhere along the way." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think we were both trying to protect each other from stress, but instead, we just stopped letting each other in." The conversation grew deeper. They spoke honestly about frustrations they had hidden. Long work hours. Feeling unappreciated, assuming the other person wouldn't understand. Neither raised their voice. The calmness surprised them both. Pain was present, but so was respect. Emily admitted she had felt alone too, even before discovering Lauren. She had missed feeling important to Daniel, missed the way he used to listen carefully to her stories. Daniel admitted he assumed Emily no longer needed him emotionally because she seemed strong and independent. They realized how easily assumptions replaced communication. Finally, Emily asked the question she had avoided all night. "Do you still want this marriage?" Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. "Yes, but I know wanting it isn't enough. I need to change how I show up. I need to earn your trust again." She studied his face carefully, searching for sincerity. She saw regret, but also determination. Trust wouldn't return quickly, and she knew healing would require effort from both of them. "I can't promise everything will go back to normal," she said, "but I'm willing to try rebuilding if we do it honestly." Relief crossed Daniel's expression, mixed with humility. For the first time since the previous afternoon, Emily felt a small sense of hope. They decided to attend counseling together. The first sessions felt awkward. Speaking openly about emotions in front of a stranger was uncomfortable. Yet slowly, it helped them understand patterns they had ignored. They learned how small disappointments, left unspoken, could grow into emotional distance. They practiced listening without interrupting and expressing feelings without blame. Progress came in quiet moments rather than dramatic changes. Daniel began coming home earlier when possible. Emily made space for conversations that weren't about schedules or responsibilities. They started taking evening walks again, sometimes talking deeply, sometimes simply enjoying silence together. Trust rebuilt slowly, like a bridge repaired piece by piece. Some days were harder than others. Emily occasionally felt waves of doubt, remembering the moment she opened the bedroom door. When that happened, Daniel listened patiently instead of becoming defensive. He understood healing required consistency, not promises. Months passed. Seasons changed. One autumn evening, Emily returned home to find Daniel cooking dinner while music played softly in the kitchen. He smiled when he saw her, not distracted or rushed, just present. They cooked together, laughing when a sauce spilled. And for a moment, the warmth between them felt familiar again, not identical to the past, but deeper, shaped by honesty. Later that night, they sat near the window watching rainfall. Similar to the day, everything changed. Emily realized the pain had not disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it reminded her of how fragile relationships could be when neglected. "I never thought we'd get here again," she said quietly. Daniel squeezed her hand. "Neither did I, but I'm grateful we didn't give up." Emily understood then that love was not defined by perfection. It required attention, effort, and courage to face uncomfortable truths. The shock of walking into that room had forced both of them to confront problems they had avoided for too long. She realized something unexpected. The moment that felt like betrayal had also been a turning point. It exposed weaknesses, but also created an opportunity to rebuild stronger foundations. Their marriage didn't become flawless. They still disagreed sometimes, still faced stress and busy schedules. The difference was how they handled those moments. Instead of withdrawing, they spoke openly. Instead of assuming, they asked questions. Slowly, trust replaced fear. One evening, months later, Emily found an old photo from their early years together. She compared it to the present and noticed something surprising. The happiness she felt now was quieter but more real. It wasn't based on fantasy. It was built on understanding. Standing beside Daniel in the kitchen, she realized she hadn't just witnessed the worst day of her marriage. She had witnessed the moment that forced growth individually and together. When Daniel reached for her hand, she held it without hesitation. Not because the past had disappeared, but because they had chosen, day by day, to move forward with honesty. The shock that once felt like an ending had become a beginning. Neither of them expected proof that love could survive mistakes when met with truth, patience, and the willingness to change. And as the evening lights filled their home with warmth again, Emily understood that sometimes the hardest moments reveal whether a relationship is ready to end or finally ready to become real.